Good evening, family, from Dakar to Durban and everywhere our people chase better days. This is Second Take, where we refuse to swallow yesterday's stories without chewing them properly. I'm Ashwyn Mberi. Tonight, we enter Senegal, where two men who once finished each other's sentences are now writing very different chapters. Then we land in Zambia, where a president's economic repairs meet a challenger ready to test if the medicine reached the patient. These stories are not separate. They are Africa asking itself the same tough question. How do we turn powerful ideas into lives that actually feel different? Let's begin. There is a special kind of ache when people who once stood shoulder to shoulder suddenly find themselves measuring swords across the same soil they once defended together. That is the quiet drama unfolding in Senegal. Ousmane Sonko and Bassirou Diomaye Faye once moved like wind and fire. Sonko carried the flame that stirred hearts across the land. Faye offered the steady hand that turned passion into direction. When barriers blocked Sonko's path in 2024, Faye stepped forward with quiet courage. Their shared cry for real change lifted them to victory. Faye took the presidency and chose Sonko as prime minister. For one shining season, Senegal seemed to have found its true rhythm beneath the baobabs. Now, the harmony has fractured. In May, Faye removed Sonko from office. The bond that felt unbreakable now echoes with tension. Parliament caught between them like a drum stretched too tight. What happened? The path from campaign trail to governing seat is longer and dustier than it appears. Sonko's power always lived in his fearless voice, naming wrongs others preferred to whisper. That same voice can shake foundations when the house is already being rebuilt. Faye, focused on keeping the roof from leaking and the lights from failing, must juggle debts, expectations, and the slow weight of inherited systems. This is no private quarrel. It is a story written across our continent in different inks. Movements born in fire and hope reach the throne only to feel the old architecture push back. Systems designed more for control than for liberation. The woman selling mangoes in a Dakar market or the farmer watching clouds in the peanut basin does not lose sleep over titles. She wants power that stays on, prices that do not rob tomorrow, and justice that does not choose its friends. When yesterday's allies clash, ordinary lives carry the cost in delayed dreams and fresh disillusionment. Power has a way of reshaping even the strongest hands. Sonko's refusal to stay silent is why so many once followed him into the storm. Yet inside the corridors of state, that same fire can ignite unintended blazes. Faye's measured steps bring calm but can feel distant to those still waiting for rain after the long drought. Both men carry fragments of something real. Their separation reveals a deeper truth. Noble dreams need sturdy vessels, or even the purest rivers will overflow their banks. Senegal reminds us that we cannot forever chase single saviors. We must craft systems that hold leaders accountable to the soil and the people who till it. Until then, our brightest dawns risk fading into familiar twilight.
Now, you're both friends, you're both allies, you both even spent time in prison together. You even chose him as your stand-in candidate during the presidential election. And just a few months ago, he said, "If there's no trust, then I will separate myself from him," when you were prime minister. And a month later, he dismissed you as his prime minister. Who broke the trust?
Merci pour cette question. Il n'y a pas eu...
There was no issue of trust. What happened was not a matter of trust. You know very well the reasons that led to the split. They had nothing to do with trust. I would rather not dwell too much on this separation. As you know, every political system is made up of alliances and separations. What matters most, first, why we parted ways, and second, how we did so. We parted ways because we had different views regarding our commitments to the Senegalese people. It was about the program. It was not about individuals, nor about power. It was about the commitments we made to the Senegalese people. And how did we separate? In many countries around the world, even in some of the world's oldest democracies, but especially in Africa, political splits are often extremely painful and have serious consequences. They frequently lead to turmoil that can even destabilize a country. What is worth noting here is that our separation took place peacefully and calmly, with each of us continuing to fulfill the responsibilities that the Senegalese people had entrusted to us. President Diomaye was elected by the Senegalese people to serve as president. He appointed me Prime Minister, a position I held for just over 2 years. I had chosen to continue supporting him for a while. However, our differences ultimately led us to part ways. I have now returned to the responsibilities that the Senegalese people entrusted to me, namely leading the National Assembly. Today, what concerns me most and what will occupy my time and energy is making this National Assembly a truly great institution.
Are you still friends with him? You chose him as your stand-in candidate to be the president of this country. What's the relationship like now?
Pour moi, ce n'est pas nécessaire de rester figé sur l'histoire aujourd'hui.
For me, there is no point in remaining fixated on history. Today, we must deal with the present and look toward the future. I believe that destiny plays a role in everything that happens and that God ultimately determines our paths. But God acts through very specific means. In this case, He entrusted me with the responsibility of choosing my party's presidential candidate, and I chose one man.
Et je considère dans tous les cas que c'est ma responsabilité personnelle, certes.
Of course, that was my personal responsibility. But if it had not been God's will, I would not have chosen him. What happened during those 2+ years can be judged not only by the Senegalese people, but by the world at large. What matters today, as I said earlier, is that this separation took place under the most peaceful conditions possible. The Senegalese people determine their future. They alone make their choice.
Les actes, la démarche et la conduite de chacun et en tirer toutes les conséquences au moment venu.
Now, we are inside the National Assembly. A question that many Senegalese people are asking themselves today is, who's in charge of the country? Is it you, the president of the National Assembly, or is it President Diomaye Faye, the president that's sitting in the presidential palace?
Non, je pense que
No, I don't believe the leadership of this country is in question. In a well-organized country with functioning institutions, the issue is not who governs or who makes the decisions. Each institution exercises the powers assigned to it by the Constitution and is fully responsible for its own sphere of authority. Operationally, the President determines the nation's policies and has them implemented through the government. The National Assembly oversees the implementation of those policies and evaluates them. From a legal standpoint, the President issues decrees while the National Assembly passes laws. The division of responsibilities is perfectly clear. There is no room for confusion. The confusion some people seek to create is entirely artificial.
Right, but you were elected on this promise to change the way the Constitution is managed. And you put in a law through this Parliament, more or less giving perhaps less power to the President, more power to the National Assembly, where you are now President. Now, that law was rejected, or at least we heard that there's, by the Justice Minister, there will be a referendum. Isn't there here a constitutional crisis or a crisis of power?
non, absolument pas.
Absolutely not. You shouldn't use the word crisis because there is none, and there will not be one. What I see is a small political group in Senegal that has lost almost all of its political momentum, supported by a small segment of what is described as civil society. I also see certain international media outlets seemingly determined to portray the situation as a crisis. In reality, what is happening is entirely normal. Today in France, President Macron does not have a parliamentary majority. Does that mean France is in crisis, or that the country has become unstable? In a few months, the United States will hold midterm elections. President Trump could lose his majority. Would that automatically constitute a crisis? Of course not. It is true that this situation is unprecedented in Senegal and perhaps even rare in Africa. Some people therefore want to portray it as a crisis.
So if it's not a crisis, what is it?
There is no crisis. The country is functioning properly. The institutions are functioning properly. Parliament is doing its job. The executive is doing its job. Local governments are doing their job. Everyone is carrying out their responsibilities. There is no crisis in Senegal, and there will not be one. I want to reassure everyone and continue encouraging our partners to place their trust in Senegal and invest here. Now, regarding the constitutional reform you mentioned, Parliament is acting fully within its constitutional role. The Constitution grants both members of Parliament and the President of the Republic the right to initiate legislative reforms. The members of Parliament exercised that right. There is nothing unusual about it. A draft amendment was proposed, adopted by an overwhelming majority in the National Assembly, and submitted to the President. I would like to point out that almost every provision contained in that text is fully consistent with President Faye's electoral platform. The only possible exception concerns the regulation of the President's power to dissolve the National Assembly and Parliament's power to censure the government. Apart from that, every aspect of the proposed constitutional revision reflects the President's own campaign commitments. Why should it be problematic to help a president fulfill the commitments he himself made to the people?
So you're willing to go all the way to fight this challenge in terms of reforming the way that power is distributed here in Senegal. What I'm trying to get at here is this isn't just a constitutional law or reform. It's about democracy, right? In a region where there is a lot of coups, a lot of questioning of how democracy is being played out for people here, whether it be in Senegal or throughout Africa. And yet, through this reform where you say there will be less power to the president, maybe more power to the parliament or more checks and balances, the president who had signed on this program is refusing to sign on this constitutional reform. So why is there not a crisis here?
Cette question, je pense que si vous avez la chance d'interviewer le président,
I think that if you have the opportunity to interview the president, he would be the best person to explain why he is now stepping back from commitments that, in fact, he defended even more strongly than I did, as the public record clearly shows. The Senegalese people want these reforms. You have not seen any mass protests from the Senegalese people against them. And if these reforms were put to a referendum today, I am convinced that an overwhelming majority of Senegalese would vote in favor of them.
Now, let's talk about the economy, because that's perhaps the issue behind all of this. Now, there's growing debt. The IMF has stalled the disbursement of money that it's supposed to give to Senegal because of this. How did you describe this debt? You talked about an odious debt that Senegal is in. Now, what's the issue with this growing debt that Senegal is going through? Under Macky Sall, we were promised a booming economy. You remember? And now we're saying we're a country heavily indebted. We can't get, or Senegalese people cannot get loans from big lenders like the IMF. Isn't that not the heart of the issue here? Not politics, but the economy?
Et je l'ai dit tout le temps, le seul problème auquel nous sommes confrontés aujourd'hui, il est d'ordre économique.
I have said this consistently. The only real challenge confronting us today is economic, particularly in terms of public finances and the budget. Why? Because we inherited a country that was already heavily indebted. When we came into office, the debt to GDP ratio was said to be around 74%, already above the West African Economic and Monetary Union convergence threshold. We then carried out an audit of the public finances and discovered that there was hidden debt. Let me be very clear about this, because part of the opposition has adopted an extremely immature approach, relying on misinformation as its main political strategy. Speaking of odious debt does not exclude the existence of hidden debt. In fact, for debt to be considered odious, it first has to be hidden. Not every hidden debt is odious, but hidden debt for which a significant portion of the funds cannot be accounted for is indeed odious. As I explained recently, we have identified billions in hidden debt. When we say hidden debt, we mean debt that was never authorized by the National Assembly. Every year, Parliament approves the national budget, authorizing both tax collection and the maximum level of borrowing permitted to the President of the Republic. If borrowing is undertaken outside that legal framework, without parliamentary approval, then that debt is hidden. We will continue to act responsibly and will never seek to paralyze the government, but greater transparency is now essential. The existence of hidden debt is no longer a matter of debate. The IMF has confirmed it.
Namibia is a land of movement, with waves that never stop reaching forward. Here, adventure is not something we search for. It is something we are born into. In every corner of this country, creativity rises, from artists, from athletes, from dreamers. And when the world comes to explore Namibia, they discover something extraordinary. Because when sport moves people, creativity moves ideas, and tourism moves the world toward us. Something powerful happens. A platform where movement meets imagination, where industries connect, where opportunity grows, where Namibia's next chapter begins. Welcome to the Creative Sport Tourism Expo. Exhibit, partner, experience. Creative Sport Tourism.
Turn now to Zambia, where the August election reads like a living balance sheet of promises kept and dreams deferred. When Hakainde Hichilema stepped into leadership in 2021, he inherited an economy bent under heavy debt, runaway prices, and fading confidence. His approach was deliberate: cut waste, renegotiate burdensome debts, and invite investors back to the table. The results have begun to show. Inflation has retreated from its dangerous peaks. Growth has stirred. Copper, the nation's backbone, is drawing renewed interest from those who once looked away. Independent voices have recognized these shifts. This is tangible progress, earned through difficult choices at a time when easier paths tempted many. Hichilema has brought a steadiness many African nations crave. The willingness to face hard realities rather than dance around them. Challenges remain. Prices still press hard on families. Jobs for the young arrive too slowly. These gaps are honest and deserve attention. Yet the direction feels firmer than the uncertainty left behind. Brian Mudumbile now steps forward as the face of a united opposition. He speaks powerfully to those who feel the recovery has not yet reached their doorsteps. Yet his path carries weight from the past, having served in senior positions under the previous government, including as Government Chief Whip Mudubile faces lingering questions and allegations of mismanagement tied to that era, shadows that have never fully lifted in the public mind. Voters are right to pause and ask whether the man who helped steer one troubled ship can now captain a truly different journey. The contrast is striking. Hichilema offers the record of someone who inherited disorder and imposed order, even if the results have not yet bloomed everywhere. Mudubile offers energy and coalition strength, yet must first answer why the past he was part of should not define his future. Zambians have watched enough cycles to sense when change is skin deep. They respect leaders willing to make unpopular repairs today for stability tomorrow. Hichilema has earned consideration on that front. The coming vote will reveal whether steady hands or loud calls for renewal speak louder to a nation tired of repeated disappointment. Look beneath the surface, and Senegal and Zambia whisper verses of the same ancient song. In one land, yesterday's brothers now walk separate paths. In the other, a president defends hard-won stability while a challenger gathers voices hungry for faster relief. This rhythm echoes from the Sahel to the Limpopo. Leaders rise on waves of hope only to meet the stubborn weight of old structures, external pressures, and the daily needs of people who measure change but what fills their pots and lights. Their homes. Our people carry an extraordinary light. They turn small seeds into harvests, limited resources into thriving enterprises, and shared struggles into unbreakable community bonds. Our leaders must rise to match that spirit with governance that feels alive, responsive, and rooted in the realities of ordinary days. We cannot forever pin everything on one towering figure. We need frameworks that channel energy towards service rather than survival, that reward long vision over short applause. Senegal teaches how quickly shared fire can cool into separate camps when trust frays. Zambia shows that even meaningful economic repairs can face resistance if hearts still ache from yesterday's burdens. Across our vast continent, citizens are watching more closely than ever. They honor progress that lasts, but grow impatient with promises that linger too long in the clouds. We possess the talent, the resources, and the deep wells of resilience. What remains is the collective will to shape institutions that turn potential into prosperity felt in every corner, not just proclaimed from the center. So, what enduring wisdom should we draw from these unfolding chapters? In Senegal, the fracture between Faye and Sonko reveals how even the strongest bonds can strain when the weight of daily governance presses down. Both men once carried a shared vision for something better. Their task now is to remember the people who lifted them rather than the positions that divide them. In Zambia, Hichilema has demonstrated the courage to confront inherited disorder and begin building order. Mudubile brings coalition energy, yet the echoes of past roles and unanswered questions cloud his call for renewal. The deeper current running beneath both nations is one we all feel. Africa cannot afford endless loops of raised hopes followed by gradual letdowns. Our mothers in the markets, fathers on the farms, and youth dreaming in crowded rooms deserve more than recycled scripts. We have shown the world how to create joy from scarcity, how to weave strength from adversity, and how to keep tomorrow alive against the odds. It is time to bring that same creative fire to the way we govern, building rules that encourage unity, systems that expose waste without mercy, and a shared understanding that leadership exists to serve the soil and its people. The days ahead in Senegal and Zambia will not rewrite every story, but they will influence the next verses across our continent. Let these moments stir us towards higher standards, not louder speeches, but quieter, more consistent results that touch real lives and restore faith. Africa holds every ingredient needed for its own renaissance. The only question is whether we will finally mix them with the discipline and imagination our ancestors used to build great things from challenging soil. That is the legacy worth claiming, the conversation worth carrying forward. We have journeyed far together this evening, from Senegal's fractured alliance to Zambia's test of whether stability can outrun daily hardship. Both tales reveal the same quiet truth. Leading demands more than winning the crown, and true governance flows from steady hands guided by clear hearts. Hichilema has shown courage in facing difficult realities. Faye and Sonko carry pieces of a once shared dream. Mundubile speaks to genuine frustrations, but must answer to the shadows that trail him. The lasting message is clear. Africa does not need flawless saviors. We need living systems and honest traditions that keep every leader anchored to the people and the promise of better days. Our greatest power has always lived in our resilience, our creativity, and our refusal to surrender tomorrow. Let us channel that power into governance that reflects the beauty and strength of our markets, our villages, and our dreams. Thank you for sharing this time with Second Take. Carry these thoughts into your conversations, challenge them, enrich them with your own lived truth. Africa grows wiser and stronger when we speak openly and listen deeply. I'm Ashwyn Mberi. Until our paths cross again, keep your vision clear, your heart steady, and your hope rooted in reality. Good night, family. The story always continues.